Say something!
This is battery acid, you slime! Hello everyone and welcome to day 23 of Terrorthon. Today we're talking about one of the most famous authors of our time. Even non-readers know his name. I'm of course referring to Stephen King. As I say, I'm quite sure everyone knows this man and his work, but Terrorthon simply wouldn't be complete without a discussion on him, so let's do that. So famous horror author Stephen King was born in Maine on September 21st, 1947. When he was a child, he tragically witnessed one of his friends being struck and killed by a train. But when asked many years later if this was an inspiration on his writing, he said no, because so traumatized was he that he didn't even remember the event. He found a book which he remembered as The Lurker in the Shadows by H.P. Lovecraft while searching in the attic in his house with his brother. The book belonged to his father and it was actually called The Lurker at the Threshold. He would later claim that this was in fact his inspiration to begin writing. He also read the EC horror comics back in the day, including Tales from the Crypt, which we discussed last year. His writing career began when he wrote in his brother's school newspaper known as Dave's Rag, and then he sold stories to fellow students which he'd written based on movies that he'd seen, but he eventually got discovered by the teachers and had to return all of the profits. The first story of his that was ever published was called I Was a Teenage Grave Robber in Comics Review in 1965. It was around this time that he also won the Scholastic Art and Writing Award as a teenager. While at university, he wrote a column for the main campus student newspaper, which he called King's Garbage Truck, and it was at this same university that he met his wife for life, Tabitha Spruce. He sold his first professional short story, which was known as The Glass Floor, to Startling Mystery Stories in 1967, and then after that he published a short story known as The Raft in Adam, which was a men's magazine of the 60s. And then while at home, he wrote the first 3 pages of what would later become Carrie, but he put it in the bin because he thought it was so terrible. And then his wife Tabitha fished these 3 pages out of the bin and encouraged Stephen to finish it. That book eventually came out in 1973. And the rest, my friends, as they say, is history. In 1976, just 3 years after that book came out, a Carrie movie was made, which began a long tradition of adapting Stephen King works for the big screen. Stephen King has now released 63 novels since that time, many of which have been made into movies, including the notorious Shining movie in 1980, which Stephen King himself hated because he felt it deviated too far from his original book. He also co-directed Creepshow with George A. Romero in 1982. His short stories Weeds and The Crate were adapted for this movie, and then when Creepshow 2 came out, that adapted The Raft short story, one of his very first. But he doesn't just write books and inspire movie makers. In 1996, the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson, approached Stephen King to help him adapt a short story Jackson had written for his music video Ghosts, which was eventually made into a short film of 40 minutes. Stephen King also wrote a musical in 2012 called The Ghost Brothers of Darkland County. And he also plays rhythm guitar with fellow writers in a band called the Rock Bottom Remainders, which also has The Simpsons writer Matt Groening, along with many other famous authors and writers. So, hopefully from all that you learned something you didn't know about Stephen King before. Oh, and by the way, if you want to adapt any of his stories, you can buy the rights for $1. Get it done, my friends. See you tomorrow.
Meteor ship!